Good afternoon, everyone. And this Red Hot Talk with Rod Lawton and myself, Jimmy Chang. It is episode 25, and we had quite a bit of fun last week. And this week, we're going to continue the theme a little bit, but we also want to talk about a brand new camera that was announced this morning. The reason I want to talk about the camera this morning is more specific to a technologies, or at least a new type of IBIS that I want to talk about, because this could lead the way of future IBIS development. So this is something that I believe could be quite interesting for most of you, because well, at least most of us using mirrorless camera these days, and I think that IBIS Tech, is almost as essential as anything else in photography these days. I mean, like if I want to go back to a camera that's non-stabilized, I always find it quite difficult, and whether I'm just getting old myself or not, I just think that having a stabilized viewfinder when you're looking at something, or even just generally taking shots, it's just great features, and I think that we can't live without it these days. So this new IBIS Tech, and I think it's worth mentioning, and that's why I'm going to bring that up today in today's video. But also, I want to discuss a little bit about the G9 Mark II, and this is going to follow on from last week, and looks like the dust has settled a little bit. And I also posted a video this morning to address some of the information that I have learned about since last week, and it's something I felt I needed to clarify a little bit. So I'll be taking a lot of questions today. If you have any about the G9 Mark II or the OM1 itself, and I'm pretty sure between Rod and I can answer quite a few of those. And also, I want to maybe have a little fun discussion with you guys as well, and on how OM system, are going to respond to these sort of changes with Panasonic, because now, with Panasonic ditching DFD in favor of face detection AF, and really kind of brings it in line with what Olympus does best, in almost since the beginning of it. It's the line between them is now even more blurred than before. So we're gonna have discussion a bit all these points here. So Rod, how are you? First of all,
I'm very well, thank you. It's been a busy few days with all these new cameras. I haven't finished doing coverage on the new Sonys. That seems ages ago, doesn't it? The A7CR and the A7C2.
We seem to be getting new cameras every week now, haven't we?
I'm doing versus articles on the G9 II. So I've done one on the G9 II versus the G9. That was interesting. Yeah. I'll be doing one on the G9 II versus the GH6. That's going to require quite a bit of drilling down, I think.
Yeah.
And also the G9 II versus the S5 II, which is interesting.
Okay.
So,
okay.
and I've got some work to do on the new Fujifilm medium format.
Oh, the 100S. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
Which my colleague is raving about, but I'm not sure. No, I think the GFX 100S was brilliant. So good. I'm finding it difficult to imagine what Fujifilm's been able to do to make it even better. But there we are. I'll find out maybe if I'll do my research. Then I'll know.
Yeah. That's good. Well, yeah, I've been busy myself as well, and obviously since the G9 launch, and I personally got quite excited about it as being a Micro Four Thirds shooter. So having a new Micro Four Thirds camera, especially in a flagship level, is always going to be interesting. And obviously, one of the reasons I posted the video this morning is because I did see quite a few misleading information. I wouldn't say misleading information. I would say, let's correct myself. I think some information that wasn't quite correctly presented, with some missing information within those videos. So I wanted to clarify those, and also perhaps hopefully giving some more balanced reviews or views between the two cameras, especially with my experience with the OM1 and also now with the GH6 as well. And just to let you guys know that I will be getting a G9 Mark II at some point, and hopefully at that stage, and I will be able to do some more in-depth detailed comparison, and perhaps even information about the camera itself in real use. So stay tuned for those contents in the future, and no doubt I'll be talking more about them. But anyway, let's start off with the first thing first. And today Nikon has announced something pretty big. When I say pretty big, they released another new full-frame camera, which is the new retro-looking ZF, which is basically the bigger brother of the ZFC. I also have. So am I excited about it? Yes and no. Well, yes, you know, a full-frame ZFC is always going to be interesting for a lot of people, and especially given the styling, and especially seeing that the Nikon has pulled a lot of technologies into the camera. It seems that yeah, it could be a worthy upgrade if one day I wanted to up to the full frame levels, or get it just for fun. But that's the no part. For fun, would I spend £2,300 for fun? I'm not entirely sure I'll be willing to do that just yet. I mean, ZFC is kind of borderline when I spend £1,000 on the new APC camera with no IBIS and very bare minimum features. Is to me is more really like a satisfying my you know, gear acquisition syndrome, you know, gas, and and more than anything else. But what about Rod? Do you think that the Nikon ZF is pricing right with like almost £2,300?
I do, because I remember what the old DF used to cost, and it is basically a modern version of the old DF, and I really like that. But then I've always been a sucker for cameras that I like to use just as much as their technical capabilities. So I'd be quite tempted by the ZF. The only problem for Nikon is that years ago they ditched aperture rings, so you've got a retro camera with no physical aperture control. But there is a little window on the top with a little tiny LCD panel that tells you the aperture. So it's something, you know, it's something.
Well,
But,
for those who may be wanting to, you know, have a lens with aperture rings, you know, remember that I did say that I think was it TT Artisans now releasing a bunch of third-party AF lenses with aperture rings, in it. So you know you can go with them, and even cheaper than the Nikon themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I'm also becoming more of a fan of shutter speed dials, because I've been doing quite a lot of content and research around IBIS and camera shake and subject movement. And I think once you start shooting, whether two situations, you shoot moving subjects or you're shooting in low light, shutter speed becomes very, very important. So the kind of shooting moving subjects, that kind of speaks for itself. You figure out a shutter speed that's going to stop them getting too blurred. But in low light, you need to get an idea of how low you can go with the shutter speed without risking camera shake. And I think you can't go by the maker's IBIS specs. You have to test it for yourself. And if you test it for yourself, you might decide, right, I'm using this lens, 30th of a second is safe, 15th is marginal. Then all you have to do is set your shutter speed on the top, leave it on auto ISO, choose the aperture you want. You know that you're going to be in a safe speed all the time, and it'll just bump up the ISO if it needs to. So I think a shutter speed dial I'm going to find much more useful than I used to think. And so just coming back around to what we're talking about, the ZF does look very nice for that reason.
Okay,
like the ZFC.
Yeah, that is interesting. You know, one particular area that, you know, about you know, the difference between the ZF and ZFC, apart from being full frame and the build itself, is to me, at least as a photographer, is the upper limit of the shutter speed mechanically has been upped from 1/4000 to 1/8000, and I think that to me is a big plus, especially if you want to shoot some fast glasses, and you know, because currently the 1/4000 limit on the ZFC is, you know, is useless to me, you know, because sometimes if I want. Yeah, I mean, if I want to do some, let's say, wide using fast glass to for some portrait work, you know, if I want some isolations and things, so stop that, you know, open up to not even like 1.2, 1.4, even say f2 in a bright sunny day, 1/4000, even at ISO 100, it's just not fast enough. You know, sometimes I need 1/6400 or 1/8000 to get the shot done. So at the moment, it's a little bit tricky, and I have to employ some ND filters to do something like that. So 1/8000. You know, is really good, and I would pay just to get there. However, will I pay double? I'm not entirely sure just yet. But the build, yes. One thing I did complain about the ZFC is the build quality, and because the ZFC is quite plasticky, and the new ZF is magnesium body, apparently with brass buttons and dials. So that's something that I quite enjoy.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be of the same quality as the old DF, but then I may be misremembering the DF. I'm sure that had a couple of plastic bits on it, but no, I think it's a very good price for
Yeah.
that type of camera.
Okay, maybe I'm just kind of distant myself from full frame cameras for a while, so and but I know all full frame cameras are fairly expensive. There are some cheaper options, but they're not to the same quality or same capabilities against something similar to like ZFC, especially not ZFC, ZF, with all these latest specs, features.
Well, you could get a Z5. They're cheap, but it wouldn't be quite the same, would it?
No. Oh yeah.
Um,
Speaking of which, though, yeah, it won't be the same. But I think one standout feature on the ZF, as far as I can tell, is the new IBIS. I think that is very interesting.
well,
Yeah.
yeah,
Go on. Go on.
yeah, I'm very grumpy about IBIS at the moment. I'll believe it. I'll believe it when I see it. So I
But
guess yeah.
But in theory, I think that is a pretty cool thing. But apparently, this particular feature that I'm gonna discuss, it only applies to photo mode, so it doesn't work in video mode. And so traditionally, a lot of IBIS, especially 5-axis IBIS, and you fix the center point as the datum. So like everything basically go around the center point or center portion of the viewfinder of the frame, and so everything evolve around them. Whether it's going to be pitch, yaw, rotate left and X, Y, Z axis, and it's all going to be along the same axis. So the new IBIS that Nikon has developed apparently can be tied to the focus point. So that is interesting to me. The reason I'm saying that is let's say if you placing this subject right in the middle of the frame, so your IBIS will work perfectly, and everything seems to be wonderful because like no matter how much you shake the camera, well, to a certain extent, and your central subject will remain relatively static, and then and that means you can capture the shot with some movement in the camera or the lens. And but as soon as you move this subject off center, and you can imagine if you shake a little bit, so the circular motion, if you, let's say, you rotate the camera a little bit, just like what I'm doing right now, if you kind of just doing a little bit like that, and then you can, let's imagine that you're having a very slow shutter speed. Then you can see this motion blur going on around the circle. Like the further out from the center, the worse it gets. So the IBIS are usually trying to counter that. And but then again, depending on your shutter speed, and you may result in some kind of movement and blur, even though with your IBIS on. So this new tech that Nikon has developed, that means if you move the center, move the rotation point to where the focus point is. Let's say if you've got face detect IS on, face and eye detect on, so it will go to the eye and head, and it will just rotate around that. So your object or your subject will still remain sharp no matter which point in the frame it is. So I think that is pretty cool.
I'd like to know how it's done. I can see how you do it with digital stabilization. I can't immediately picture how you do it with mechanical or optical stabilization.
Yeah, this is something I wonder myself, because this is exactly one of the standout features that so far I've heard and also seen some people talking about it, but no one has demonstrated it. And because everyone who's been talking about a camera, they are not, well, either they're not allowed or they're just not showing exactly how it works at the moment. So I will be keen to learn a little bit more about that before we say this is the great tech or not. But in theory, if it works what they're describing, and that could potentially change the game in IBIS, because for a lot of people, especially portrait photographer, who often place subject off center, and that could have a profound effect on how the stabilization works. I think that to me is pretty interesting.
Well, let's see how it works out. I mean, there are occasionally differences between what a thing is designed to do and what it succeeds in doing, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt. I'd like to see it in action and see how it works. does anyone remember using Canon's? It's not dual pixel AF. It's the other one, where you can use the two readouts from the pixels to
Oh,
change. What's it called? I can't remember. It's escape. I knew. 5 seconds ago, I knew, and it's gone.
well, the very original system before the dual pixel came out.
No, what it is, it enhances resolution or changes the appearance of fine detail. I'm going to look it up. Sorry, it's just I've just completely forgotten what it's called.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, and while you're looking for it, and does anyone feel excited about the new ZF? I think that's what I want to find out from you guys as well. I've already seen some people saying that they're tempted, and I saw one comment earlier from I think who's Seraphine, is saying that, you know, I'm trying to convince my wife to do it without getting a divorce. And it certainly is interpolation. Andrew said, is that a word?
Yeah, it is. Interpolation of what? What are we interpolating?
The pixels? No, I don't know.
What are we interpolating, Andrew? As far as the IBIS mechanism is concerned, I don't know how Nikon's works. I remember Pentax's worked by floating on a kind of magnetic field, and so that the sensor is moved by changing the what's the word I'm looking for? By changing the magnetic field.
Yeah.
I don't know how Nikon's works, where it's got like little gears and cranks and pulleys. I don't know. I shouldn't think so. But yeah, Pentax was magnetic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, the Canon thing, dual pixel RAW.
Dual pixel RAW, right?
So you go into digital photo professional. You switch on dual pixel RAW, and you can transform the appearance of fine detail and whether things were in focus or out of focus. I never could. Whoever invented the Canon must have been living in the parallel universe, because it never made any difference to me.
I think I kind of remember that tech now, and
yeah.
The thing is, I think you can only change from certain extents. You know, like if you got a really shallow depth of field scenarios, and then you can't really shift focus like that. You know, if you got a relatively close subject, you maybe just do a little bit of it. And I don't know. You know, this is you know, just like that what was that company called? They made those the light field cameras. You know, that never took on, and then unfortunately, I played around with the cameras for a bit, and it was pretty cool, but it's clunky to use. The amount of editing work you need to do to make it presentable is like enormous.
Well, it's conceptually difficult. It's like 360 but worse, because it's difficult to get a head around, and it's too complex, I think, for consumers to understand what you did and why you did it. But yeah.
Okay. Oh, Rob Trek is in the house. Hi, Rob, and nice to see you here. And he's another big Michael 4/3 guy. And so yeah, it's interesting. I think I saw some comments there. Some people say that I'm excited about ZFs, and some don't. And yes, that's interesting to see some you know, two sides of it actually. I personally, you know, I said that already. I'm quite excited about the ZF because I already had the ZFC, and now Nikon almost addressed most of my concerns with the ZFC, such as build quality, the mechanical shutter speed limit, and also now it has IBIS. But it still has the same EVF, which is a bit disappointing, for especially for that price. And you would have thought they would up it a little bit and to have a 5 million dot EVF, but no, they still have a 3.6. So that's a little bit disappointing in that regard.
Yeah, but 3.6 isn't so bad, because a lot of cameras have less. A lot of cameras from another maker, Sony, 2.36.
Yeah.
So you know, you can buy a 61 megapixel Sony with a 2.36 million dot EVF.
No, that's worse than TV screen. Oh well, that's Sony for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So that's that's my take on the ZFC. And if you got any other questions or anything you want to talk about it, please leave some comments there in the chat room, and we will pick it up later. And now let's move on to the Micro Four for a little bit. And how many of you are still very excited about the G9 Mark II, and or whether you I don't know how many of you are photographers and how many of you are videographers. And let me know your thoughts about the G9 Mark II, between the G9 Mark II and the GX6, because for some reason, because I know Rod is going to do a comparison between the G9 Mark II and the GX6 at some point, and it's interesting to discuss it simply because they both almost can do the same thing. Like in video specs wise, I know there are some subtle differences there. And but what puzzles me the most is that if you are a videographer, that when Panasonic first announced the GX6 and like you can do all kinds of great things, like 5.7Ks up to 60p, 124K, and they also introduced CF Express card and for the fast file transfers, and those will enable all those high bitrate, ProRes RAW, and all kinds of stuff to be recorded through that fast card. But now that's what puzzles me. They said that the G9 Mark II can do the same, but with regular SD card and UHS 2, and that's what puzzles me, because if I take out the CF Express card slot from the GX6, those options are grayed out, so I can't actually record in those options unless I have the CF Express card installed in the camera. And what does it tell me? I'm not entirely sure.
I'm gonna guess, Jimmy. I haven't gone into detail with all the specs, but I'm gonna say that the GH6 probably offers higher bit rate, just a small number of very high bit rate codecs or formats that you can't get with UHS2. Whether or not you'll ever need them, that's another argument. But I think that's what it's going to be, that there's just going to be a handful of very top end formats that you can do on the GH6 you can't do with the G9 II. But it seems to me very strange what they've done with the G9 II. Panasonic seems to think it's made a camera prioritizing stills photographers, but then throwing everything at it for video.
Yes.
It seems a bit crazy, because I don't think there are very few, if any, better specified non-cinema cameras in the mirrorless market. I mean, it doesn't do 8K, but then turns out that not many people want 8K. But it does everything else. Well, I think the issue with the 8K is that the hardware is not quite ready. There's the overheating issue.
Yeah.
There's the editing issue. Having said that, before we started the talk, I was saying to Jimmy, I bought myself a new Mac. So I was in the Mac store, and I'd already decided which one I wanted. The guy was running through, and he said what software to use. I said, iMovie, Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve. And he said, oh, you're going to find this amazing. And just whizzing through this video, doing real-time editing and previewing. I said, oh, so it's what's 4K? He said, no, it's 8K. So hopefully my new Mac should be able to do 8K. But I've got no use for it at the moment.
No, to be honest, the GX6 is my highest resolution video camera so far, which is 5.7. I don't have anything over that, and but in reality, man, unless I really do some digital cropping and zoom in, in editing, I'm not going to need that sort of resolutions anyway, because none of my devices, none of my TV or anything like that is capable of actually displaying 8K, and I doubt that many are at the moment in the world. So it's to this point, I think that unless you are in the very high-end filmmaking industries and or doing archiving projects, and I don't think that 8K is necessary at this point, perhaps even for the foreseeable future, because I think 4K seems to be the sweet spots at the moment. I think this kind of most commercials and things are going to be using as a standard for now. And even for internet, still people asking for 1080 contents for web usage. Most companies are not going for 4K because it's going to like hock up the servers and the bandwidth and everything like that. So it's still not something that they would like to see. But moving that aside, and I think it's an interesting point about the bit rate there, and I do actually agree because when I see some of the footage being shot with the G9 Mark II in terms of videos, I do see a lot of blowout highlights. I'm not entirely sure whether you've seen them, Rod. And from those that I've seen, even from DP Review, not DP Review, Petapixels, from Jordan and Chris, and I've seen some from Michael for Nerd, Emily, and also from Richard Wong's. A lot of the highlights are blown out. It seems that the bitrate is very low. I'm not entirely sure what the settings are and things like that. It seems that dynamic range is kind of somehow limited in those samples footage that they film. So that's what puzzles me as well.
Yeah, well, trouble is by the time anything gets onto YouTube, it's been messed around already, hasn't it? I don't know. I think we should probably not rush to any judgments, because when anything new comes out, you do get a lot of very rushed content online.
Yes.
That has been prepared very quickly,
as we learned.
So you won't always get to see what the camera can do. You just get very fleeting first impressions. And as we know, every new camera is about 20% more complicated than anything that's ever gone before. And it can take weeks and weeks. This is a problem facing reviewers. You've got, say, 5 working days to make some intelligent remarks about a piece of hardware that could take you a fortnight to research and learn. The cameras, if only we were still using film SLRs, where you could pick one up and know what it does in 20 minutes. But a new camera, something like the G9 II, you've got to figure out what it can do and how well it does it in less time than really you would need to devote to it. That's the trouble.
And I think, like, for those who are listening right now, and you may not have experienced what Rod and I had, when it comes to product launches, and sometimes you do only get a product for a couple of days. In some cases, if you're lucky, you may get it for a week. But even for a week, unless you are actually going out 24/7 shooting, it's going to be very tricky to try to find all the answers, especially now with digital cameras and all those computational features and all the other things. Like, you can see, the menu can be as thick as an encyclopedia. So it's really hard to really try to go through every single details there. So you're bound to see some mistakes, and you're bound to see some missing informations there. And a lot of the early reviews are usually more like an overview of what the camera has, or at least what the manufacturers shout out features are. They're just basically repeating it, trying to do a shout out for what it can do. The best thing to do, I think, is still, like I always suggested, if you're really interested in the camera, maybe wait a month or two, when the production sample really out, you can go and try the camera yourself, or wait for something more like at least a camera that's in production firmware, and some proper reviews coming up after an extensive use. Then you see those comments there are probably more genuine than the earlier parts of it. It's great to get excited and see all the features and things, and but until you really get your hands on one, and then you can start really assessing the image quality, the performance, and all the other features that you may be interested in about the camera. I think that will probably be a better judgment.
It is difficult when you consider all the things that people expect to be able to test. So if we take the G9 II as a hypothetical example, somebody like me you'd have to check basics like image quality, resolution, check the dynamic range of JPEGs and RAW files. You check the autofocus, but of course you've got to make sure you understand the autofocus settings, as you'll be able to tell us, Jimmy. But the autofocus systems themselves can fill a book. You also want to check the stabilization, but you also have to remember that the manufacturer certificates will be using a lens different to yours. And very often they only quote, say, 2 axes of movement, say pitch and yaw, not the 5 axes. The IBIS is complicated. Then you've got to check the video to see,
Yeah.
if you've got movement artifacts. Is the 4K oversampled or line skipped? Is the 1080 as sharp as the 480? It 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 takes me longer now. It takes me more words to describe what we have to test than you would have in the review. People
Yes.
think a review should be able to fit on a couple of pages in a magazine. There's probably a couple of pages of testing criteria. So
Yeah.
it has got very difficult. And I guess we've got to expect that in the early days, people are going to rush to opinions and judgments. And I think we have to remember that YouTube's a pretty brutal place. Every hour you're late with your video is who knows, 10,000 views lost. Who knows?
Yeah.
So yes, it is difficult. But my argument's always been, go with a consensus. You
Yes.
might have a favorite reviewer, but they may still make mistakes. Wait to see what a bunch of people who you know and respect say, and form an opinion based on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, first of all, there's no right or wrong there, and also I can see that a lot of the especially YouTube content creators and influencers, when they create reviews for certain type of videos, and whether they're brand ambassadors or not, they seem, obviously they know the brands, or they know the specific cameras that they use, simply because they're familiar with all the menu systems and how the camera operates and things like that. And without trying to upset anybody, but the early video that I posted today has addressed some of those points that I see when I saw those early videos. Parts were missing in those videos, and describing them as not being there, the features. And so I just think that in a lot of the reviewers, when they do reviews, they probably not familiar with these, let's say, all-in-one cameras, and they just left it out basically completely. And I don't think that was a fair. When you do a comparison should be at least more equivalent, showing all the information on screen and everything like that, just to be more transparent, so people can judge by themselves exactly what's going on. And Rod and I also discussed it as well. Is a lot of people, when they test cameras, they put all the default settings and put it side by side, for people to view, without saying much. The problem is, when you see those footage, and what people's perception is, if a camera somehow seems to be delaying actions when it let's say, focus tracking, it tracks a little bit slower when someone changed directions or changed position, and then you just think that camera is slow. But in reality, is that the case though? Because camera manufacturers have different preferences when it comes to stickiness to the AF points. And some may actually want it to be more sticky, so even when someone walks in front of the subjects and it doesn't change focus, then that's probably what they wanted to see, or what how they want the camera to behave. And some may want ultra fast responsiveness. Let's say I point the camera to the front of the camera, it changes to the camera straight away and move it back and go back to the face, just like what Sony does with the latest product showcase AF mode. And so it really depending on what sort of AF system you're looking at and how the preferences are being set. But without saying anything of those, or the adjustments or anything on screen, people just looking at it pure sample footage side by side, there's no way you can tell which one is actually better or worse. And to be quite frank, I think in a lot of cases, you can't get bad focus these days, especially in face detect and hybrid focusing systems with all the latest cameras. I think they're all very comparable. And, you can easily dial into the sensitivity, to the speed of AF focus, to change and mimic, to almost make it equivalent to the other camera if you really want to. But there's a lot of settings involved to get it done, and that's the whole exercise that I was doing with the camera, with the video today, just to tell people there are settings that you can do to change it to behave more in line with how G9 motors behave in its default setting. But which way is better? That's entirely up to you to decide. But I can somehow regenerate a video that is way more responsive than the one that's been showcased in some other comparison videos.
It's there are many pitfalls and traps for anyone reviewing hardware. There are two things I always do when I get a new camera review. First of all, I do a complete custom function reset, because you never know what the last joker who had it did. They probably mucked it up completely. So I always do like a factory reset. The other thing I always do is download the manual, so that even if the camera's gone back, I can still check before I
Yep.
say something to see whether the camera will do it. I might not be able to test it, but at least I can make sure that what I'm saying ties in with what's in the manual. It's very time consuming, but and even then you can miss stuff and make mistakes. But it's just a reflection of how complicated cameras have become. But it is very easy to get a sample camera, go shooting, and think this is terrible, not realizing it's because of what the last person did, or even what you did yourself. So I recently did a review of a
Yeah.
Canon 24 to 50 kit zoom, and I went around taking shots, got
Yep.
back home, and thought, well, I don't think much of the stabilization. That's because I'd switched it off to do a
Yep.
stabilization test the day before. So when you test stuff, you can accidentally muck it up and forget what you've done. It is a bit of a minefield. So
Yeah.
I do have sympathy with people who get it wrong, but I think if you figure out that you've got it wrong, you need to do something to put it right. And I know on YouTube you can't edit a video once it's live. It's live. You
Yeah.
can't take it down because you lose all the views. You can't
Yep.
redirect it, but at least you can. I believe you'll be able to tell me this, Jimmy. You can put a caption. You can overlay a caption saying, "Actually, no, that's wrong," or something
Yeah.
like that, can't you?
What I see a lot of YouTubers do is they basically pin the comment in the comment section below, to correct certain
Right.
mistakes that
Okay.
they've done,
Okay.
or
Yeah.
even put it in the first line of description. So when people scroll through the video, they already see the first line say some mistakes been made and it's been corrected. And yeah, I've seen those corrections, but I'm not entirely sure about overlays. But yeah, you can't adjust or edit the video afterward. You can, however, trim it. You can trim it. Yeah, you can
But
trim.
you can't trim it from the middle, though, can you? You can only trim it from the end. Is that right? Or can you trim
Yes,
it in the
yes.
middle? Yeah.
I'm not. No, I don't think you can trim it in the middle unless there is a
No. No.
copyright infringement. Apparently, then you can chop
Right.
that bit off.
Okay. Okay. But YouTube doesn't help.
No,
It would
no.
be wonderful if you could re-edit and republish a video, but you can't.
Yeah. So so that's the G9 Mark II, and I know that it's a very exciting camera, for me as well. I just think that a lot of people have been waiting for that long. I think it's been 6 years since the original G9. It's probably one of the longest
Yeah.
ever product generations in modern age.
I,
um,
doing this comparison though made me think that the G9 was actually somewhat ahead of its time, because the similarities between these cameras,
yeah.
the
Yes.
and when you think that the G9 was 6 years ago, so they both got the same EVF, same
Yeah.
resolution, same magnification. The Mark II has got a higher resolution rear screen, but then the G9's was over 1 million dots, which is
Yep.
probably high enough.
Yep.
Both got vari-angled touch screens. Both got dual UHS-2 card slots. You can't take that for granted these days.
No.
Um,
No.
and the G9 can't quite match the G9 II's burst mode, but it could still do 12 frames a second with a mechanical shutter. That's not bad for a 6-year-old
It
general
is. I mean,
purpose camera.
to be honest, like, okay, I'm not, how I know all of you are listening right now, and so let me know in the comment, and do you care about 60 frames per second? I'm only asking from a personal perspective, because I know people are drilling on numbers these days, especially when a new camera comes out, and I personally never ever shoot that sort of high speed, and even I know the all-in-one can do 50. I do 10, maybe 15, like I do the sequential shooting low. I don't even do high. And it just not in my nature to do that sort of thing. And even when I'm, sometimes have some fun photographing birds or animals running and that sort of thing, I still not going to do 60 frames per second, because it's just not something that I do personally. So I know it's a standout feature for the G9 Mark II, or the all-in-one for that matter, and it's just something that I think that people may be a little bit too serious about those top speed number, and because it's just somehow just puzzling me a little bit.
We got a culture now where people aren't testing for suitability; they're testing for weakness. They're
Yeah.
trying to find a weak spot and then exaggerating that to kind of characterize the whole camera, which annoys me rather, because it's like the Panasonic's DFD autofocus is now characterizing all of those cameras, which are very good cameras. It's only one property of a collection of very good cameras. But
Yep.
people are now only focused on weakness, and that's what they
Yeah.
go for. It's
Un-
annoying,
un-
really.
It is. Now I've got the GX6, and I can personally say that the DFD system is pretty amazing, actually. Especially for contrast detect AF. Even with Richard Wong's testing video side-by-side video against the G9 Mark II, I'm actually quite shocked how good it is in video tracking. And it's still a contrast detect base. It's no way near as fast as the face detect AF, but the consistencies, the transition, even though you still kind of see the pulsing just ever so slightly, you can see it, but it's the tracking that means, is actually doing its job. Because I've never seen a contrast detect AF system can behave like that. So Panasonic did almost perfect it. It's to the point that I think, wow, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I think they just had to give up because the world was against them. Well, excuse me.
No worry.
Pardon me.
Talk about DFD now. You're getting upset. And Hendo actually said that 60
I found out how to swallow.
And Hendo 1111 say that 60 FPS is just a gimmick. And well, I know there are people who use 60 FPS. Like let's say if you want to capture a bird flying straight into the water, catch a fish, that kind of thing. You do need that sort of speed to trying to get that frame. But I guess those are very isolated cases and very limited cases. And unless you're in that sort of field that you need that sort of speed, even when you shoot sports, football match, you can basketball, any sort of fast sport capturing, and 10-15 frames per second is fast enough for most people. Like imagine all these old SLR film photographers who used to capture footballer kicking balls in the football field. They were only operating 10-12 frames per second, and they still capture shots brilliantly. They don't need faster, just because they know when and how to execute the shots. And like I said it many times now, features, electronic features, and all these AI focusings, assist, and everything like that, they're there to help you get better shots, not necessarily trying to, do it for you. You still have to know and learn how to execute your camera, when to press the shutter, anticipate the shots, and rather than just machine gun everything. Otherwise you're going to end up with like 2,000-3,000 shots for just one kick.
Well, that's it. Very often you're making work for later, because sooner or later when you shoot bursts, you're going to have to go home and go through them all to find the best one. And I'm going to do some very rough arithmetic here. It's going to take you 4 times longer to go through a 5-second 60 FPS burst than 15 FPS.
Yeah.
It's an extreme, I've done it a few times, an extremely boring and tedious, even soul-destroying job, going through dozens and dozens of near identical photographs and trying to make some kind of decision about which one was the best.
Yeah.
So when you did the shoot, you thought, this is brilliant, I don't have to worry. Well, you do, because sooner or later you're going to have to go through them, and that's boring.
Yeah, it is. And but I do like one feature that G9 Mark II has that OM doesn't, is that any sort of burst shooting, it will group themselves into little subfolder, so you can actually delete that entire sequence. And I think that is pretty good. That is amazing. And I would like to see the same thing implemented in the future OM system camera, because that is really good. Because if you do end up in a scenario where they have to do sequential shots, high burst, and if you do know that shot is not working, you just delete the whole folder and the whole chunk of file is gone. So that is really, really good. So that is something about the G9 Mark II. And so let maybe have a little talk about OM system now, since we're on the road talking about it. And so now with the G9 Mark II, new face. That's how the Panasonic has marketed their Micro Four Thirds cameras. Now there's the new phase for them. And
that's so funny.
It does make the whole Micro Four Thirds industry, or at least the platform, more exciting than ever, but also at the same time now make it a little bit more complex between the Panasonic and also OM system as a whole now, and people might now be more confused and about which camera or which side they should go to, which brand. Because in the past, yeah, there are some lower-end cameras that people just buy for the sake of, whether it's good look or, just for affordability. But when people who are shooting high-end stuff and wanted pro bodies and more capable bodies, and, if people want stills camera, they go for Olympus and now OM system. Or when they want videos, they will go for Panasonic. But with the arrival of G9 6 years ago, that line's already starting to blur. But at that time, you can still see the differences between the two because, OM system has more computational stuff. It has hybrid AF focusing system, while the G9, well, is still capable, but it struggles with continuous focus with the DFD at that generations, and also it hasn't got any computational stuff at all. But now the G9 Mark II has live composite. Okay, it hasn't got the other stuff that Olympus has, but it has live composite, and that is a start. And now they have hybrid focusing system, and that's a start. So so that does make OM system probably have to think a little bit. So yeah, it looks like the line is blurred now. It looks like they are getting closer to what OM system is kind of been doing for so many years. And does that mean that OM system need to start to play catch up in the video department and bring it closer to Panasonic, or they are going to just stick with stills? But what else are they going to do with still to continue to differentiate themselves against the upcoming Panasonic or future Panasonic Micro Four Thirds developments? Because very, very clear now, if the next generations of high-end Panasonic Micro Four Thirds cameras, could be the G9 Mark III, could be G10, whatever they're going to call it, could potentially have more features and bring it even closer to what OM system is doing. And so that I think that alone is pretty interesting. What's your take on it, Rod?
I think you go with the brands you prefer. I think there have been many times in the past where different camera makers have been targeting the same audience with the same kind of camera, and it's been fine. Nobody fell off the perch. Nobody went out of business. I'm thinking back to 35mm SLR days when almost every camera was the same. You just kind of went, if you needed more features, you paid more money, but you wouldn't say that Nikon cameras or Pentax cameras or Olympus cameras were unique because they all had shutters and lenses, and you put film in the back. And it didn't seem, they all carried on quite nicely. So I don't myself think it matters very much that Olympus or OM system has a unique proposition, or that Panasonic does, because I think you'll just get people who prefer one over the other. So it doesn't worry me perhaps in a way it might worry others. I will keep using Olympus cameras if I like them. If I stop liking them, I might swap. But for me, the difference between 20 and 25 megapixels probably not enough on its own. And I guess there are other things about Olympus cameras that I've got used to that would make me stick with them, like having the lever on the back for 2 sets of button functions or 2 sets of dial functions. I've got used to it. I find it very useful. I use it all the time. And the buttons on the left of the top plate, one for drive mode, one for autofocus. I've got used to them and what they do. I'm quite happy with those. So a lot of it is familiarity and confidence.
Yes.
And I think that's how most professional photographers would approach cameras. Familiarity and confidence.
And I guess also in handling as well, which is another thing. And there's no right or wrong answers there, because everyone's got different hand shapes, different hand sizes, and so the camera shape does affect to a certain extent. And like I said, I still can't get used to the GX6 ergonomics because the grip just doesn't feel right. The all-in-one, on the other hand, it feels a lot better. It just somehow fit me perfectly like a glove. So if I have to handle a camera for like a prolonged period, and I certainly would rather hold an OM1 or EM1 more than the GX6. So as a photographer who use the camera daily, like these little things does contribute a lot into when it comes to purchase decision, because if you're a professional photographer, you can create images regardless what system you use, what camera you use anyway, so it doesn't really matter in that sense. So whatever feels right, whatever like menu system that you can get used to, and then you can operate quickly, you can hold the camera securely and feel comfortable with for a long time with heavy lenses, then I guess that's probably the ultimate decision. And I know that as a reviewers, and you review gear and you look at a lot of stuff, technical stuff, like number crunching, for instance, like megapixel resolution, ISO, all the other stuff that relating to the performance, technical performance of the cameras, you can quite easily draw a line, oh, this is a better camera based on numbers. But in reality, I think those are actually not a real photographer looking for.
Yeah, I've had some of the best cameras and I didn't like them, and I've got some very average cameras and I like them a lot. So they're kind of agreeing. I'm kind of agreeing with what you say. They're physical objects. You have to like them. So, for example, the original Lumix G9, there were things about it I wasn't fond of, but I think that's probably the best handling camera I've ever owned. Best camera to have in your hands I've ever owned. I don't think the G9 II will feel like that. Because it's basically a Lumix S5, and I've handled those, and I'm so about them. The G9 was brilliant. Not so keen on the colors and some other things, but as a camera to handle and use, fabulous. If I could have had the Olympus sensor in that and the Olympus controls from my EM1 III, I'd have been very happy. Because I prefer the G9 body, but not really much else about it.
You know what? As an Olympus OM system user myself, I was envy about the one thing on the G9, original G9, not the G9 Mark II, and that is the top LCD info display. And I really want that on the Olympus camera.
What's the song? You don't know what you had till it's gone. That's how I feel about those top panels.
It's a little thing. Again, it's a little thing, but I think it's pretty useful.
It is because you can look. You don't have to pick the camera up and look at it. You can be much more subtle about checking your adjustments. And if it's dark, you just flip a lever around a shutter release, and a little lamp comes on. You're not like blinded by a 3-inch screen just because you're trying to look at settings. So it's just stuff like that. It's very old school, but I was very sad that went. And I just don't think it's the new one is going to feel the same way in the hands.
Yeah, and I still remember when the EM1X, before the EM1X came out, and a lot of people were speculating because it has so much space on the top, they're going to have an LCD screen, and I thought that would be like a G9, but that didn't happen. It's still got a big blank canvas on top of the camera.
I kind of think of the original G9 as being as like a camera that was as big as it needed to be to handle properly. Whereas I think with the G9 II, which is basically an S5, it's a big camera trying to be small, and it's just not going to feel quite right by comparison.
I was a little bit shocked that when they reused the S5 body, and I can see that that could be some cost saving somewhere here. Oh, don't say that. The last 7 generations has exactly the same. But I would like to see a slightly smaller body and or new design actually coming from Panasonic, but that didn't happen either. But whatever the reasons, and there's no mistake that now all the Panasonic Lumix camera, at least from the I would say the pro, semi-pro line, is very consistent in terms of look and feel, because they all basically have the same bodies. And so
why couldn't they get the G9 body and just stuck the new stuff inside it? Why?
Well, that's what Olympus did, right? That's what the EM1 series did, because they never really changed the EM1 body shape that much. There's some modification here and there, but it's essentially the same body. And that's exactly what they did. Because if it's something feels good and feels right in the hand, why change it? And then that's exactly what Olympus did for the last few generations of cameras. And but I admire them for that.
As a camera maker, you can't win, because if you don't change the design, you get people like me complaining about it. So 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 they so I think you get somebody like Sammy who make bodies I don't particularly like. I mean, it's a very subjective thing. People wouldn't agree with me, but they make bodies I don't particularly like and never ever change ever, and they'll just keep doing this forever. So that's
Yeah,
bad. But then you got Panasonic, who maybe deliberately or perhaps accidentally with the G9, purely in my opinion, made a great handling camera and didn't
yeah.
know it and couldn't wait to change it. So you can't win.
No, no, you can't. And what I'm interested to say that is, will OM system make a different body for the OM5 in the future? Because this is essentially the same body as the EM5 Mark III. And
Yeah.
and the EM5 Mark III compared to the EM5 Mark II was also very subtle into the change. So will they have a radical redesign when it comes to the next generation OM5, which to me is still as a gold standard for super compact and kind of semi-pro body and the micro four thirds. Well, in fact, probably in the camera industry, because nothing is as small as capable in this size for now, anyway. And so I'm quite keen to see whether OM system will be more radical when it comes to design, where they're going to change a lot of stuff. And from the design language that we've been seeing for the last 5 to 6 years, and perhaps slightly doubtful whether they're going to do something very extreme, but you never know. You never know, and they are indeed need some refresh and to some of the future models, especially what we discussed just now. And the G9 Mark II has blurred the boundary a little bit more. Whether they're gonna change a little bit, in terms of design and also perhaps features. And will they have a new sensor in the future? That's probably very certain that they're going to have a new sensor. I doubt it very much they're going to stick with 20 for the next flagship. That's for sure. But again, you never know. Maybe they have a new BSI sensor that can push even further and keeping us at 20. It's just hard to tell. Just hard to tell.
I think it would be nice to see a new OM5 because there are some things about that camera which bother me, and I still own the EM5 III, and I've used the M5. The swap between the Mark II and Mark III for the EM5 from metal to plastic did it a lot of harm. It just doesn't feel the same. It'll never break. It's more water resistant and weatherproof than ever before. It's lighter. It's better. Blah 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 blah. It's just not the same.
No.
And the other thing is, I feel that if you're going to have a camera that small, you need to swap to a rangefinder style, because I think having the viewfinder mounting housing, I know, you know where I'm going, don't you? Having the viewfinder on the top is fine in a larger camera. In a camera of that size, it's just a little bit weird. You've got a tiny camera that doesn't quite go in your pocket because it's got too much stuff sticking out.
It's got the bulge at the top, isn't it? That's what you're referring to. Yeah.
You need a small camera, in my opinion, to be unfussy. And that's the issue with the OM5. It's a bit too fussy. It just has to be a Pen F2. Just stick the same gubbins into a Pen F2. I know the Pen F isn't a small camera, but the shape is much better suited to sticking it in a jacket pocket.
Let me get it down. The comparison.
Yeah. It's not always about the actual size, but it's about the shape as well.
Right.
Go on then. Let's see.
Okay. Right. I have a side by side now. This is the Pen F, and let's see. So this is the OM5. I've put it side by side. Can you see that?
Yep.
Hang on. Let me just line them up.
See, I don't mind that the Pen F is just as big, but it's a much cleaner shape. And if you're looking for a small camera to fit in a bag or a pocket or a corner of a backpack, not having all those protuberances is much nicer. So
in fact, the Pen F is actually definitely smaller by quite a margin. Actually, if you look at the side profile here, It's slimmer, and it's still got the EVF there on the side.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it is a smaller camera than the OM5. And
And
yeah, I think it's a
I
design marvel.
found
These things.
I found that I couldn't get on with not having an EVF, but I found that the EP7,
Yep.
although similar size to the M5, was drastically superior as a pocket walk around camera, just because of its shape.
Yes.
You had that 14 to 42 lens, the pancake zoom. Switch it off, it can go in your jacket pocket, coat pocket,
Yes.
possibly even a trouser pocket if you don't mind looking a bit weird. But it's a pocketable camera. The EM5 Mark III, which I've got, or the OM5, so confusing. It ought to be a pocket camera, but it isn't, because it just snags on everything. It's the wrong shape.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who's listening right now, and what would be if OM System to design a brand new camera, yeah, and that is pocketable, that is capable as the OM5. What body shape would you prefer? Are you gonna look at the rangefinder style camera, or still the retro looking SLR type style? And there's two style here, very distinctive, very different, and we're not talking about the gut, only purely from a design point of view. And what I would like to see is just something maybe along the line of the Pen F, but have the capability, just like the EPL7 that you mentioned, has the capability of installing an external tilt-up viewfinder, electronic viewfinder. That would be cool, and because I do like top-down view. And in that case, I don't even need the LCD screen being flipped up or down. I don't even need an articulated screen. I just use the EVF instead. And I would like to have that option, because I know a lot of the older pen cameras have that options that you can install an external EVF. So that I personally would like to see those. And but yes, of course, I do like Pen F, so I would like to see a new Pen F. Perhaps more than an OM5, although I love the OM5 in terms of capabilities and yeah, you know. But in terms of pocketable, you still can't beat this. This is still a pocketable camera, like if we talk about small and compact, like just look at the size of this thing. It's just tiny, tiny, tiny. And yeah, it's definitely the pinnacle of being or small interchangeable micro four third cameras, even smaller than some of the fixed lens options out there at the moment. And it still shocked me today how small it gets, for a micro four third camera. And I would like to see whether it's going to be OM System or Panasonic to remake something like this. Just to remake, just to modernize it, give a bit more modern features, just introduce a tiny thing. If they do, I bet it's going to be a big seller, because there are a lot of people who are looking for a second camera, if not the main camera, a second camera that they can travel with, and at the same time is compatible with all their existing lenses. It's an option, right? It's an option. If you do have a pancake lens, if you do have some other smaller lenses, that could be your travel combo if you really want to travel light. Just a tiny little pocket, or even your coat pocket, because this will easily slip into anything.
I think so just a couple of comments. I just set me straight. So Chuck L says, how well do rangefinder cameras work for those who are left eye dominant? I don't know, but I just had a quick go, and I think that any camera is a bit awkward, really.
You can adjust yourself to it,
because if you use with something like with a camera that has a top mounted viewfinder, right or left doesn't matter too much. The point is your nose is still squashed up against the back of the camera, so I'm not sure it would make a difference. Yeah, nice combo there, Jimmy.
Very nice combo.
So, the other thing is so yeah, who is Seraphin points out that if you live in Florida, and you're in your car's at 150 Fahrenheit plus, then it's better to have a plastic body. Well, yeah, I kind of wish I did live in Florida, but I live somewhere a lot wetter and colder. I think it's preference, isn't it? I think a plastic body, I wouldn't deny is practical, but
Yeah.
I do miss the feel of the metal body. And then handle 1111. Is that handle the composer? I don't know. Wait, yes, a plastic body camera. Any light body where you put on a kind of pretty substantial metal lens, it starts to feel unbalanced. So this is why I've never been swayed by the idea of small light camera bodies, because you are going to
Yeah.
have to put a lens on, and the chances are you're going to have to put on a lens that's heavier than the camera. I'd rather have a heavy camera and a heavy lens than a light camera and a heavy lens, if that makes any sense.
That's certainly interesting. Rob Track's interesting too. If Ohm System announced a Pen F2, it would totally quell my gas for the ZF hands down. And I guess, if they do, I still think if they do, it will be a sellout. And whether they believe it or not, I do personally believe that it will be a sellout, because there's currently no other options. Apart from the X series from Fujifilm.
Well,
But
they're going.
Yeah, but you don't see anything at the moment. Although I thought they confirmed it to have a X100, whatever the next one's coming next year.
That's the rumor, but I think the interchangeable lens ones, they look to me as if they're not gone, but they're going. Yeah.
That's quite sad to see. So that means there is absolutely no option unless you're willing to fork out $8,000 for a proper Leica.
I do think the Pen F arrived too soon for the market.
Yeah,
because the Pen F came and went before the market for that kind of camera fully matured.
Yeah.
So I think the comments are right now that if you could buy it now, it would be a complete sellout. But it's too early. It is before people were ready.
I think so. And every time I make a video about the Pen F, and every time I take this camera out, people always ask me, what is it? It looks really nice. And then, is it? Well, I always tell them, yeah, it is a very nice camera. And even though it has the technology, it's about 8 years old, or 6-7 years old, and I think it's still a bloody brilliant camera. You can still take gorgeous photos. I love I know that people actually dislike the front dial. I actually do like this color dials at the front. I actually do like it. In fact, speaking of which, this front dial, that you can take into color, mono, or anything, you can customize it. Now it's gone to the Nikon ZF. It's not a front dial, but it's a top dial. But you can actually have a flick of the switch. You can go to mono mode, which is exactly what this does. So
it's fine. But I'm a raw shooter, so I don't mind using these things to visualize the shots. But I'm always going to use raw files in the end, to be honest.
Yes, it is. But then again, there are a lot of people who treat digital cameras like a film cameras. They just want to shoot JPEG. They don't want to manipulate it. Whatever shooting camera, they just use it. That's why a lot of hipsters like Fujifilm cameras, because they have the film profile. It's almost like you're shooting film again. So now Nikon's taking that same approach. I'm giving you black and white mode. You can just shoot black and white JPEGs and then out of cameras, and so we give you that dedicated option. Just as like you said, the Pen F may be arriving too soon. The market just wasn't quite ready for this sort of features. I wouldn't call it gimmicks, but because people do use it.
I'd say the market wasn't ready for a premium retro camera.
Yeah,
it's like it wasn't really ready for the original Nikon ZF.
Yeah,
but I think people are going to go mad for the ZF.
Yeah,
and I think the same now. The Pen F landed at a time when everyone was tech obsessed and only cared about numbers, and thought that retro style camera, even if it added $5 to the price, they'd go berserk. They just weren't. the market, excuse me, at that time wasn't interested. That's changed. Unfortunately, it's too late for the Pen F.
It is, and I bet if the Pen F still on sale, even though it's an older camera, it probably still got a lot of buyers. That's because of the look. know, and for people who actually buy these sort of retro looking cameras aren't looking for speed anyway. So like they're not necessarily they need to have 60 frames per second. They don't need like, you know, the
No,
continuous AF. They're not even
no.
vlogging with these sort of camera. They're just more likely carrying on their neck and snap a few shots on the street. So you know, the market is certainly here, and these people are also willing to pay for it. You know, you can clearly see, you know, that you know, Fuji, now Nikon are definitely milking it. And while Olympus was one of the first guy who do these sort of retro looking cameras, are kind of backing away from it. And so it's interesting, you know, whether OM System will kind of go back to these retro looking cameras and start to give it a second go, and just to see whether it works or not.
I don't know. I think they got their fingers burnt and they won't do it again. It's very sad. It seems to me that all the headline development features of new cameras are based on very limited use case scenarios. I mean, whatever happened to ordinary photography? Do people not do that anymore? Is everyone trying to use eye detection on at 60 frames a second on birds in flight? Is everyone trying to shoot 4K 120 10-bit 422 internally? It seems to me that camera development is being driven by very extreme and narrow use case scenarios.
The thing is, I mean, it's always like you know, like I keep using Formula Ones as an example. You know, like everyone wants to try how fast a Formula One can drive. You know, like everyone wants to try. If they have opportunity to get it, they will get it and try it out. Whether they need it or not, that's another thing. And I think it's the same thing with camera. You know, if you give headline features like, you know, the like 80 frames per second, they want to try 80 frames per second. But in reality, you probably just go and use it once just to try it, and then you just step away from it and never use it again. And that's how I see photographers these days, and or camera buyers. I wouldn't say photographer, camera buyers these days. They just buy it for the features, they buy it for the numbers, and when they go back and start actual shooting, they probably won't even use all those features again. You know, apart from you know, the first week or two, you know, just to try out the thing. You know, oh, that's it, that's cool. But then, you know, when it comes to real shooting, then you realize that, oh, that's a bit too much for what I need, and you go back to the normal shooting mode again.
We all need different things, don't we? And you need different things to what I need. What I need is a camera where you can change a focus point easily and the stabilization works. That's not as common as you might think. But the things I need from cameras, and I suspect the things a lot of us need from cameras, don't make very sexy headlines.
No.
And so, I mean, you've used like a rangefinder, haven't you?
Yes.
You could never market a Leica rangefinder on specs.
Nope, they never do.
No, it's a completely different kind of product. You got one there, have you? Is there any camera you haven't got?
Yeah, that's my workhorse many years ago, and it's got brassing all over the edges now, and but hey?
people pay for that.
Really?
You need well, yeah, but that's
you
part
can kind
of
of see it's brass everywhere now.
but that's like a badge of honor. You've got to have that on a classic Leica, haven't you? Just
Well,
to show that it shows it's brass.
It shows that I'm a shooter.
Yeah,
because I know people pamper the Leica, you know, because they're expensive. You know, they wrap around with protection films and everything. I just use the thing, and it just shows how much I use the camera.
I think Leica has changed its PR agency. I better be careful what I say not to upset anyone. But some time ago, no, the current agency is extremely good. Some time ago, it was extremely difficult to get any Leica for review. And when it arrived, it's very typically in a jiffy bag with no body cap. And with the lens that didn't have front and rear caps, and sometimes might even be not working properly. That made it quite hard work. But things are better now. But I think people who like a rangefinder
Yep.
are not going to be impressed by specifications, because for them, it's how the camera handles and operates, and how it makes them take pictures. And I think that for me, this is the issue with reviewing cameras now, that it's very difficult to measure these things and explain to people why they're important. And yet
Yeah.
they are very central to the kind of pictures you get.
Yep. I think so. I'm just reading a few comments. Is actually gonna have a little bit of discussion with retro looking cameras at the moment. I find it quite entertaining actually.
Mm,
Um,
mm, mm.
I think there's quite a few of you actually talk about the Pen F and also the how the retro market is developing and everything. It certainly is interesting, because I know a lot of people who buy Olympus cameras, and with all due respects, a lot of you guys are go for the look as well, because of the how they design the cameras and how the overall external aesthetic looks. And I mean, I do agree. I mean, it's a very good looking camera. To my most of the Olympus cameras are pretty good looking. And now Rod got a proper retro looking camera there, because it's a proper retro camera. Is that a Pentax K100
Yes,
K100 or 1000?
no, it's a Spotmatic from the
Spotmatic.
60s. Yeah, Spotmatic 500. So, yeah, the revolutionary feature about this was that it had shutter speeds slower than a 30th, because it worked out how to put a little clockwork escapement in the shutter mechanism. But this is the thing about how cameras feel and what they like to use. You can design any new retro camera, but it won't be like this, because all this has is the shutter speed dial.
Yep.
Still turns, can't believe it. And every lens,
Yep.
has a focus ring, an aperture ring, and then all you have to do is focus.
Yeah.
All you ever do is three things. And it was the same three things if you bought an OM1 or a Nikon FM or a Pentax, well, not an LX, a bit more complicated, but
the MX.
There are only three things you had to do.
Yep.
And this is why it's all become very complicated, because suddenly there are 100 things you need to know about before you can take a picture. And if you get one of them wrong, you're in trouble.
Well, in essence, you can still operate modern cameras with what you just said, and
I know, yeah.
You can easily just fix the ISO a certain number, just like you putting a film speed into in the camera, and you fix that, and you just adjust the exposure triangle.
I don't think I can show you the viewfinder. I can't get it close enough. I can't show you how big that viewfinder is. There is no modern camera with a viewfinder that big.
I think the original film OM1 also pretty big as well. I got it.
Sorry, I'm modern. There is no digital camera with a viewfinder that big.
Yeah,
which I miss.
You know what? I think the EM1X viewfinder is pretty big, but it just doesn't have the resolutions, and it's a pretty big. It's a pretty big viewfinder, but because it's a big viewfinder with the low resolution screen, so it just almost like you're looking at a pixelated TV. And I mean, I thought EM1X could have benefited by a 5.76 million dot EVF when it first came out, because the size is huge, and then you need a high resolution to counter the size. It's a much bigger size than the standard EM1 series, just with the same resolution, so it doesn't quite make sense at the time. I guess another opportunity that could have made those cameras better. But one thing I have on my desk actually is somehow I dug it up from my drawer. Is this?
Oh, the Lexus. Yeah.
And as for some reason I run a battery now, so even the lens doesn't get back into the body. But then, but yeah, there you go. This is a relic. but it shows how small these things was, and I can't actually remember how small these things was.
Yeah, some of those old point and shoots, they're like archaeological discoveries, aren't they? But they weren't terrific cameras, really.
No,
Cameras have come a long way.
I think even a 5, 6 year old iPhone would do better photos than that one.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah. Okay, and let's see here. Rob actually said, I think the Lumix S1R is pretty close to being that large. I think he's talking about another, responding to another comments up there. But the S1R is pretty big. It is pretty big.
Yeah. I quite like them. The S1 and the S1R, they're big cameras, but if you use a lens like the Lumix S24 to 105 f4, it's quite a good lens for those cameras. You're glad it's a big camera because it balances okay.
Yeah.
If you put a lens that big on a smaller camera, it's not very nice.
Yes.
In my opinion.
It is, yes. So let's just to summarize a little bit of what we talked about today, and then see if we can answer a few more people's questions and comments. So let's start off with Nikon, since they released a new camera today, and they now seems to have led the way with retro-looking full-frame cameras. So do you think, Rod, that Canon, Sony would follow suit with their own version of full-frame retro-looking camera? Because I know there's a rumor about Canon may release one which can basically date it back to the design of the AE1 and the boxy SLR during the 70s and 80s. So that would be interesting if Canon does one like that, and that means that the retro-looking market is truly back if the big boys are joining the party.
Is the AE1 a retro camera, or was it somewhere in between retro and modern? Because I don't know, the A1 and the A1 are quite closely related, and the A1 is quite a cult camera these days, but it's kind of most of the way to being a modern camera design rather than retro. So I don't know. I'd be very surprised if Canon made a retro camera, though Canon does have a kind of weird experimental division and makes all sorts of weird cameras.
Yep.
But if they handed it over to that, I think you'd get something very odd, made of plastic.
Yeah.
So I can't see Canon doing it. I think it's a Nikon thing, Nikon and Fujifilm.
Yeah, it is, and but then again, I think Nikon may have started something within the full-frame market, because we already had retro-looking crop sensor cameras, like Fujifilm is already a big player in that sector there, and obviously OM System is in the Micro Four Thirds side. So there are retro-looking cameras everywhere. It's just that now full-frame seems that Nikon has led the way now, and it's basically a step up from the ZFC that we've known. Mark just actually had a talk now and just bring his comment up. Yes, this has affected us all over in the UK. And unfortunately, everything we buy in the UK now is extremely expensive, usually more expensive than the US counterpart. Whether you're buying a camera, whether you're buying a car, or whether you're buying a computer. You can see that all the list price for the latest iPhone and Macs and things like that are more expensive than Apple.com in the US. And camera is exactly the same. And unfortunately, I know, $2,000 in the US for the new ZF, in the past, if based on the correct exchange rate without inflation and everything, we could get it for $1,500, round about $1,600 kind of, ballpark figure. But now we have to pay £2,300 for that, and so unfortunately, call it blame Brexit.
I think possibly, but different importers seem to have different policies. For example, Panasonics are often cheaper in the UK. Yeah. So you can get better deals in the UK sometimes, but I agree, as a rule, the UK prices seem to have gone higher than a straight dollar to pound conversion. I don't really know why. It's something to do with the importers. Maybe they're paying different duties, or maybe they're just profiteering. Who knows?
Hey, you know what? Maybe it's a good time for all of you guys to go to the US for holiday and just go there and buy the camera and come back. The saving that you get, you can buy your tickets.
Yeah, but the thing is, so you get a US warranty. So
that is true.
It's rare for cameras to go wrong.
Yeah.
but you'd kind of prefer to have a warranty valid in the territory you live in,
Well,
probably.
but most manufacturer warranties are usually 1 year or 2 years, and maybe you could get extra
Yeah,
year if you do register them online.
yeah.
So, very
I mean,
unlikely you're going to get any problem within the first 2 years anyway.
I agree. I've never had a camera break that's anything close to a warranty period.
Yeah.
Famous last words, but yeah, yeah.
But then again, there you go, and yeah, it's pretty sad that we have to pay more money in the UK than anywhere else actually, if you look at it. And you can easily fly to the US or fly to Asia, or even better still, go to Japan and probably get a pretty good deal, because the yen is very low at the moment, so you can actually get pretty good, decent exchange rate. So if you're flying there, you probably get a decent amount of saving if you get it there in Japan. I may actually do that because I'm flying to Japan next year. So you never know. You never know. Now let's go to the second point that we talked about, the G9 Mark II, and the dust has finally settled a little bit, and now everybody got very excited, including myself, because it's been rumored for so long. It has been 6 years since the original G9, so there's a lot of waiting there. And certainly, I think in terms of the camera designs and the features, Panasonic has finally delivered a Micro Four Thirds cameras that is worthy of being a flagship. And that's my personal take on it, and I think that quite a few of you would probably agree. And I have also just made a video, like I mentioned earlier, to address some of the points about the OM1 and the G9 comparisons. But apart from that, my feeling is still very neutral. Like I said, I will probably get a G9 myself as well, just to play around with it. I already have the GX6, and I don't see why I wouldn't get another one there, just to have a play, do some comparison, do some interesting about Micro Four Thirds for this channel. Yeah, Rod, and in terms of Panasonic, and obviously now seems that they have gone back to Micro Four Thirds, have a little bit of a love, kind of go back to the Micro Four Thirds community. What happened to the full frame? I know they had the F5 S5 II earlier this year, and all sound good in that. But what about all the other things that have been doing in the full frame market? And they're still facing an uphill battle against all the other big boys out there, including Canon, Nikon, and Sony especially. They are fighting with all these big guys with huge ecosystems there, a lot of budgets, a lot of users in general, and because Canon, Nikon, for instance, they really had a huge community themselves. Trying to steal people away from those full frame market is going to be extremely difficult. So they probably would just try to attract upgraders, perhaps, if I can call them, from APS-C or Micro Four Thirds to full frame within their own community, or trying to just find new people altogether to get into the system.
Well, I think it's good news and bad news for Panasonic, really. The upgrade part doesn't really work. So I think we talked about this before. Panasonic's MFT lenses are fundamentally and completely incompatible with its full frame cameras. There is no crossover. So if you decide out of brand loyalty to go from Panasonic Lumix G to full frame, you are going to have to start again from scratch. You can't take any of your old stuff with you. Or if you do, you're going to have a bag with two separate systems in. So maybe you have like Lumix G for your B-roll, or for your kind of for your travel shots.
Yep.
And then your Lumix S for your what's your, was it B-roll, A-roll? I don't know.
A B-roll, yeah.
But
B-roll.
So if you have that for your main camera, or whatever, you can't have a bag full of these cameras and swap stuff between them. They're two systems.
Yeah.
That is an issue for Panasonic, I think. But the new Blackmagic full frame L-mount cinema camera, that's interesting, because they've chosen the L-mount, which will immediately give some proper weight to the idea that the L-mount is a serious filmmaking format. I think that's going to help Panasonic a lot, because people are going to start saying, well, I think it'll make a difference. Yeah, I think for somebody like, I mean, it's a fairly narrow community, people who buy Blackmagic cameras, but it's like an endorsement of the format, isn't it? Do you think?
It is. But then again, because Panasonic is making video-centric cameras, wouldn't they think, like, okay, that's another player that eating to my expertise. you know, it's gonna be
Yes.
a bit
Well,
tricky.
I I I think the benefits will outweigh the competition because it's a very different camera. You
Hmm.
wouldn't use them on the same projects. Possibly the Lumix S1H and the new Blackmagic, but they're very different style of filmmaking because the Blackmagic cameras are designed to be rigged up. They don't really have autofocus. They're
Hmm.
really for directed commercial filmmaking,
Yep.
whereas the Panasonic cameras are more for single shooters, vloggers, independent filmmakers working alone. Different sort of filmmaking, I think. So I don't know. I reckon Panasonic will benefit more from Blackmagic's support of the format than they'll lose in sales. Having said that, $2,000 or pounds for a 6K full frame proper cinema camera, that does tend to make ordinary mirrorless cameras look pretty expensive, doesn't it?
It does, it does.
And
But then
it's
again, if you look at Blackmagic, yeah, of course, it's a filmmaking machine. It's a filmmaking
yeah,
camera, but
yeah.
It doesn't feature a lot of stuff in it. No
Well,
autofocus.
it doesn't it doesn't
There's
do
no
stills.
IBIS. There's nothing. Yeah,
It's not a
and
hybrid camera at all. No.
it's a camera for you to rig on a gimbal,
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the stabilizers, on a tripod. It's not something handheld like a Panasonic system or any sort of mirrorless system,
No, no.
because it's designed for handheld shooting or run and gun kind of thing. And well, Blackmagic is a proper setup camera.
So I don't know. This is my argument that the Blackmagic's not going to steal any customers from Panasonic, but it might make people thinking about Panasonic and Elmount to kind of look up and say, "Oh, this is a proper
Mm,
filmmaking format because Blackmagic's doing it."
yep.
So I don't know. I think that will help. It'll help them more than it hurts them.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
Okay. That's in.
I think Blackmagic helped MFT as well with the Pocket Cinema 4K. I mean,
They did actually,
about
and they did popularize the at least from the filmmaking point of view. That's for sure.
they've made it a
But
valid format for
yes,
professionals.
but then they haven't kind of released another Micro Four Third camera since.
No, no,
uh,
no. But I mean, it's that. But that's just the way Blackmagic operates. They don't work like anyone else. And I think you could probably argue
yeah,
that the original Pocket Cinema 4K
yeah, yeah.
couldn't
How?
really be improved upon in any way that
Yeah.
Blackmagic is capable of doing.
However, like speaking of cine cameras, and are you familiar with the Z cameras?
I've not used them. I know of them, but I'm not that familiar.
Apparently they have developed, and I think someone has shown a clip or someone interviewing the CEO. I think they're having an exhibition in the States or somewhere in Europe. I can't remember exactly which show they're on. They have featured a new Z camera that using a Micro Four Thirds sensor with global shutter. And that is a new thing, and that is something quite
Yeah.
exciting.
Oh, it is,
And
yeah.
yeah, because it's a new tech. We all talked about global shutter one way or the other over the last few episodes, and someone has mentioned it in the past. It's still a distant thing for mirrorless cameras, but now it seems that this guy, I think he'd be the chief engineer or the CEO, has shown a camera with global shutter in a Z camera. They wanted this boxy, basically cine camera that you have
Yeah.
to rig up. And so that itself is pretty interesting because it's a brand new sensor, and that could potentially filter down to other more consumable level cameras. So it's interesting to look at, even though it may not make into productions in the future, but at least it's something to show. Just like Sharp did an 8K prototype before, that never kind of went ahead to become a reality, which is quite sad. But
I was
now,
amazed that I was
yeah,
amazed at
so
how many people were able to review a camera that never existed. That was quite extraordinary.
but then again, now
But
we're onto Michael Four Thirds, and it's kind of like a final draw before our ends today's talk. Now, G9 Mark II is certain to bring a bit of a buzz into the Michael Four Thirds community, and I'm pretty certain that it has excited most of us who are in this Michael Four Thirds world. And now OM system is we kind of discussed briefly about what they are looking at in terms of retro markets and all the other stuff. But in terms of future developments, what do you foresee, and how OM System would, further their product developments not in terms of point and shoot or anything like. I know they just recently released the TG7, which is their next point and shoot rugged camera. But in terms of mirrorless interchangeable cameras, do you think that there's going to be a breakthrough, that could basically position themselves in a slightly more premium market than the current kind of like a more mid-tier consumer level sector, by means of whether they're gonna really aiming for the high end, like reintroduce EM1X, like OM1X for instance, like really high end professional rugged camera with a battery, with built-in battery grip, but throwing all the bells and whistles with the latest sensors, latest EVF, all the feature they can imagine into a body. Whether they're going to redo that, I don't know. What do you think?
I think the sad thing about the EM1X is that it was shaped for use with big lenses, whereas the OM1 is not, unless you put a grip on it. That's just how I see it. But the other thing that OM System could do, unfortunately, Panasonic's already done it with the G9 II, is extended dynamic range, because what Panasonic has done, don't know much about this mode, but I understand the principles. It has dual gain circuitry for dual base ISOs.
Yeah.
But instead of using one or the other, you can use it in a high dynamic range mode where it processes a single capture using both circuits, one for high gain and one for low gain, so that you have extended dynamic range image merged into a single file. And I believe that's also a thing on some ARRI cinema cameras. Yes. I don't know whether you get a huge gain. You don't get a huge gain like HDR bracketing, but I think it's a stop.
I think you only gain about like 3/4 of a stop, if not less than one stop. I think, yeah.
But most digital cameras are terrible at highlight roll off. The highlights are there and then they're gone, like somebody's flicked a switch. So any gain, that's got to be a good thing. But if Olympus could, will I ever stop saying Olympus, Jimmy? I don't know.
I can't either.
No. If OM System could adapt its computational processing to stack multiple exposures as an HDR composite, I know it does this already, but what you get is a kind of artificial looking JPEG, isn't it? It's kind of everybody's old-fashioned idea of HDR. It's not very nice. What you really need is some kind of very wide gamut 32-bit DNG file or RAW file that you can then post-process to access far wider dynamic range than you get from a single RAW file. That would be an interesting step forward.
That's from a very technical point of view, but I think that it's but I think like in terms of people, like let's say a photographer wanted to look into the brand itself, because OM System is still a new brand, and they need to carve themselves a name in the industry. And so far, they are still doing the transitions and still releasing products, slowly changing names. Even like the latest 150-400, the big wide zoom lens, and they have recently, finally actually changed the productions to actually including the OM System name instead of Olympus. And so this is the first ever lens that they actually change the names midway through production cycle. So because all the other Olympus lenses you buy now, and even though they're still producing fresh out of the factories, are still bear the Olympus names. But the 150-400 is the first product that is still current are being changed. So that is quite interesting in itself in terms of rebranding. So if you order one of those lenses now, that you won't be able to get the Olympus names anymore. By the time you get it, it will have the OM System brand all over the place. But my point is, this is a new brand. They need to carve themselves an identity. and you know, I don't think they want to follow exactly what Olympus has done before. Although, despite as much you know, we Olympus fans, fanboy would like to see, but they need to have their own identity. They need to have certain standards. They need to maintain that standard and differentiate themselves from other competitions, whether it's going to be aesthetic, whether it's going to be features or technical abilities. And so it's something that I personally think that whether they are going to upmarket themselves, make themselves like a, you know, Japanese Leica kind of thing, or they're going to make themselves a basically tech savvy, another computer company that kind of based on features comparison to other camera manufacturers. I'm not entirely sure at this moment in time, because the OM1 certainly is a very capable camera. The OM5, you can tell, is what they have been following what Olympus has done before, is basically downsizing from the previous generation flagship, like the EM5 Mark III was the EM1 Mark II, but in a smaller body. So the OM5 is the EM1 Mark III in a smaller body. So it's still following the same kind of progressions. So you can kind of see that maybe OM1 will be the future OM5 Mark II, you know, if that makes sense. So will they do something different? You know, kind of touch base on it. Will they do something radical in the future? You know, to change the OM5 completely and make it even more powerful and maybe even slightly smaller body, maybe like you said, maybe a Pen F2, whatever, you know, something. They need to somehow make it a little bit different when it comes to product designs and also features.
Yeah, I think OM System and Olympus got it right this time. The problem has always been timing. I think they're going for a very narrow kind of long range nature wildlife bird market, which is never going to be very big, and they're never going to win it completely. I think that is too narrow an angle. I think they had it right with the influencer fashion approach, but they abandoned it before it properly took hold. Same argument as with the Pen F. I think I think for today's hybrid creator market, it should just bring back the pens. Bring back the pens. Get a little add-on EVF. That's quite cool. People might go for that. But it's they. I think there's a danger in targeting a kind of elderly, affluent leisure generation. That's I think I have a horrible sense that's what they're doing, and that's not where not where the market is.
But then, isn't that what Leica is kind of doing as well? You know, like the elderly people with higher disposable income level, then they can just pay more for the camera.
But there's a collector industry around Leica. Most of the people who buy Leicas put them in a cupboard and then go out and buy another one. That's where Leica makes money hand over fist. The number of people actually taking pictures with Leicas is probably quite small.
I'm one of them.
Mostly, I would say they're collectors.
Right.
Excuse me. But I think as well, OM System is in danger of abandoning the very things that do set them apart, just because they're being terribly conservative. They're trying to win a tiny market instead of like going for a big market like the old days. I just think the fashion vlogging influencer market is massive. If only they're prepared to like make the effort. And I think the winning points about the MOT system are small lenses, affordable lenses, stabilization, and they seem to be just not leveraging those advantages.
I have, you know, off the book obviously, and then I agree, and I think that the influencer market is huge and it's growing by the day. It's not going to stop. You know, all the youngster, all the upcoming new blood to the industry, you know, these are the people who are going to buy cameras, you know, for the foreseeable future, and this market is growing. And most of these people who use a camera these days are one way or the other, whether you like it or not, are TikToker, Instagrammer.
Yeah, yeah.
These people are using cameras. So
You
that
you want
market is growing
you want a
exponentially.
camera. You want a camera that looks cool that you can hold in one hand for
Yeah.
TikTok.
Yep.
And that's exactly why the X100V had that brief flurry of excitement. But the X100V was never as good at this as the pens were.
No.
They,
No
I
flip.
think, they were better because they were smaller, lighter, cheaper, interchangeable lenses, no viewfinder. But then TikTokers don't want viewfinders. I
No.
think the Olympus has been, and Home System, too quick to abandon things that have that have become important in the market. So
So
they like did it first and backed out too soon.
so in other words, that they should have stayed a bit longer.
Yeah, just
And they could have ripped the rewards.
an EPL 11 with the 20 megapixel sensor. That's all they have to do. Maybe phase detect AF, maybe 5-axis IBIS, not 3. A Pen F2 for the Leica market, and
Yep.
an EM1X2 for pros.
Yeah.
So an integrated vertical grip, proper solid body size and shape for those big lenses, proper battery life, and keep plugging away with the AI autofocus.
Yeah.
And the lenses are already there.
They are. They are.
So
That's very interesting insight. And I
what do I know?
as a photographer myself, and partly being, whether you can call me a YouTuber, influencers or whatnot, and but I can definitely see the reasons behind what you just said there. And like I said, the influencers markets are definitely not to be ignored, because it's still a growing market, and it's probably the only market that's growing who uses cameras, because the general photographers are pretty much set and done. It's a limited number there. It's not growing as quickly as you would like. But the influencers market, on the other hand, is growing rapidly. And there's so many wannabes, and they wanted to get into the market, get into the scene, and they're all trying to look cool. So good looking cameras is definitely a plus for them. And then a capable cameras where they can shoot vertical videos, whether you like it or not, the vertical videos and something like that is almost like a must-have features for these influencers, because all they want is to plunk the camera on the tripod and shoot vertically. And then if they're good looking, they can pose for a photo as well. So like it's something that I think is a win-win for them. And especially a lot of these influencers don't like heavy gear, which is what you said, and they want something light.
You shoot one-handed, don't you? You've got the camera in one hand at arm's length.
Yep,
that's your style.
Yeah, and I think that something light and small looks good. You don't need to be pro level capabilities, but something mid-tier, even low end, is more than enough for them to take the shot and just shoot some 5-second videos, and they don't need anything more than that. And so they don't really care about battery life, because all they need is something that's long enough for them to shoot something, and that's done.
Just do a matching power bank.
Yeah, that's what they do. They charge their phones anyway. It's an interesting insight for sure, and that is why I can see that. And I think I talked about it maybe about last month or 2 months ago now. Sony, apparently the sales figure shows that the majority, or 60% of the profit, is coming from vlogging cameras. So and that shows, the influencers markets are there, and they are also wanted to pay the money.
I think you can even make a business, Jimmy, with a channel, call it Ollie Vlogger. You scoop up all the used pens you can find, and just do nothing but content shot with and about pen cameras as a kind of modern style icon. I'm going to dream about that tonight. I'll never do it, of course, but I'll dream about it. But I think this is where they used to treat that market as being a core part of the business. I don't know why they stopped. I don't know why they stopped.
And even I remember Pen F when it first came out, they did a lot of fashion related campaigns. You know,
Yeah,
they use the Pen F to shoot a lot of models.
yeah.
You know, and subsequently the EPL series, they did a lot of model influencers collaborations, you know, and they did a lot of that for a few years.
So it's all about association, isn't it? Back then, the brand was associated with glamour and wealth and success, and now it's associated with standing in the field with a bunch of pensioners, photographing egrets.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
sorry. I take that back. I didn't mean to say all that. But do you know what I mean? I think they sacrificed the kind of glamorous associations for something much more narrow, and I think that's a mistake.
Well, we shall see. We shall see, because you know it's a new company, it's a new direction, and hopefully, you know, we shall see, you know, how the company evolve in the next couple of years. And time is tight, that's for sure, because the digital camera market is evolving rapidly, and you can see new products being brought out in just to tailor for a specific market. And one of them, in particular, is what we just talked about: is the influencers creator market.
All right then? So just to throw this out there, if somebody you know said to you, "I need to buy a camera for my influencer channels, what should I buy?" What would you tell them? If you take off your ambassador hat, I'm throwing this out to everyone listening in as well. What camera would you recommend that people should buy?
New camera,
any camera, given that the person asking you is looking for a tool that they can understand, that just gives them results without them having to be photographers or videographers.
I would actually go for this, whether you like it or not. The OM5.
Yeah, pen.
I would. And no. The only reason I say that is because, and first of all, it is nice looking. It's small, and it does have really good IBIS, and it has face detect AF, which is important for content creators. You know, if you shoot videos, if you shoot YouTube, and it also does have unlimited recording, so it's not limited to 30 minutes. And so it's all these little things there that may put this into a very good kind of overall package, and it's light enough, small enough to be handheld doing vloggings without having to use the gimbals, because the stabilizer is actually quite good. You're throwing a 9mm lens on it is actually very capable. It does the face tracking very well in vlogging situations, and all the ingredients are there for it to succeed. It's weather sealed, then again, so it's quite a nice little package, you know. And I know people will say, why don't you go for full frame? But then again, full frame will be considerably bigger, and then and
full frame brings its own problems.
Yeah,
going full frame brings problems for this particular audience.
Yep.
That you wouldn't have otherwise had. So yeah, Angelo, very right there. There's no headphone jack on it. I don't know. I'm not a serious shooter, so I probably wouldn't monitor audio anyway. But
the only port it has is a mic jack. So no, it doesn't have an audio jack. So you kind of have to rely on the audio display on the back LCD screen to judge whether you're clipping or not.
But there are mics with audio monitoring jacks built in.
It has,
but
and even
probably only.
But if you're using like a Rode wireless Go, you know, you can actually record a backup channel anyway, so you don't have to worry about too much on that. And in fact, the OM5 inbuilt audio, what do you call it now? I just suddenly lose the words, and it does a pretty good job in actually monitoring and preventing blown out. So it's actually not a bad audio system at all. But sometimes the auto adjust does kick in unnecessarily, so just to bear it in mind. But overall, it's actually a very kind of good all-in-one solutions in my opinion. And I can see that there are people also, Andrews, talk about the phone and DJI Pocket 2 and all the other little gadgets
Pocket
these
2 is
days.
Brilliant.
But yes, they're pretty good. But then again, you talk about content creators who also wants to take photos, right? You know, so DJI Pocket 2 isn't a photo tool at all. It's a pretty okay kind of vlogging style mini camera thing.
But it's a kind of POV camera, isn't it? It's immersive. It's the sort of camera where you're in the center of the action. It's not the sort of
Yes.
camera you necessarily use to film other things.
Yep.
But
Yep.
but I own a Pocket 2. They're brilliant. I think they're
Yeah.
really brilliant.
So
with
yeah.
that limitation.
So Pocket 2 is pretty limited when it comes to content creation. So you do want a camera that will give you the flexibility when needed. You know, like having interchangeable camera will give you the varieties of things you need. So you can have 2 or 3 lenses, zoom lenses, so you can have all kinds of angles, all kinds of compression, you know, and you don't necessarily need the pro lenses, the 2.8. You can get an f4 version, which is a lot smaller and lighter. And it will give you like all the reach that you need, all the content that you need to generate, as well as photos if you want to take something. And being a micro four third, and you get really good close-up capability, so you can kind of do some close-up shots as well without having to use a macro lens. So I still think the all-in-one is pretty good. And also you talked about phone. Phone's another thing, but that's another thing for another day. I think we're going to talk about phone versus camera, because I am getting the new iPhone 15 Pro Max, and so I will be keen to actually talk about it, because I know we keep saying how good phone are these days, but if you really dig into the details of the both photos and videos, no matter how good the latest iPhone 15 is, even with ProRes, and you can see that the difference between a proper camera compared to a phone. You can't get away with a tiny sensor eventually. You know, there's so much a tiny sensor can do, even with all the computational stuff, because it will go to a point that it will look kind of fake in a way. You know, the sharpening, you know, the noise reductions and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, because phone is very convenient, that's for sure, and it's handy, it's there always. But if you really want some high quality content, it may not be like Hollywood style. You want a mid-tier, something that is presentable. You know, a mirrorless camera is the way to go. You know, it's cheaper. You know, like to be honest, man, this thing costs, even with the lens here, it costs less than an iPhone 15 Pro Max.
I'm only going to say though that you can't get it in denim or brown leather or in white. And you think I'm being silly, but I'm not. This is important. This is why I think the pens were so good, because you could get it didn't really matter what they did, but they looked amazing. And the
it does.
the OM5, it is amazing, but it doesn't look it.
No.
So
I mean, yeah, I mean, outright, I mean, of course, I would say the Pen F is the most good-looking cameras ever. You know, like I really wish it has the OM5 guts in it, and this will be really the camera, the only camera I ever need if it has the OM5 guts in it, and because it's that good, and it's compact, it's light.
I've just thought of a headline for my next opinion piece. If you could still get the Pen F, nobody would need the X100V.
Yes, yes, that is true. And
I think trouble.
Even if OM System like sell this for like still selling this for 1,200, I think people are still gonna buy it, because interchangeable is it's got all kinds of bells and whistles in it. I think, you know, I still think, you know, OM System should be one of those.
It's only 1080 video, isn't it? But then Leica rangefinders don't shoot video at all, and
no,
people still live. So no, people don't want you. If you want video, you get a different camera. You have good Lord, you might have 2 cameras. Whoever thought, you know, one for one type of thing, one for another.
How about that Pen F2 with the OM5 guts in it, but it's a still only cameras, no video features, and just photo mode. And then keep the OM5 for videos and hybrid shooting.
And with denim skin, you can put on
denim skin,
brown leather or white.
You know what? I've seen people rip this skin out and just rebrand and like reskin it with other colors. I've seen people doing it, and
it's another business.
Another business.
Yeah.
Who wants to do a Kickstarter with me?
Skin your Ollie.
Yeah, skin your Ollie.
There's something about that I don't like, but anyway,
sounds like a porn channel.
Oh, I didn't think that. Oh, okay.
All right. Okay, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. I think we had a long enough chat, and it's very interesting to see all your comments. And I hope you enjoy our little chat about all kinds of things today as well. Yeah, please do stick around and also leave some comments in the comment section below when this live stream ends, and we'll pick it up and hopefully we'll discuss some of the items that you listed there for next week and the weeks below after that. Don't forget also, this live stream is not just live. You can also retrieve and also replay at any time on demand using the playlist. And if you haven't subscribed already, remember to do it. And you can also play as an audio podcast if you're in the States. Doesn't happen anywhere else at the moment, unfortunately, but you can play as a podcast in the States using the YouTube audio app or the music app. So thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you all next time. How's that? Bye for now.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.